Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to Midnight Dark Stories. The night is deep. The stars are hidden. And it's the perfect time for us to gather here and dive into the mysterious and thrilling world of tales. Prepare to be spellbound as we uncover the secrets that lie in the darkness. Let's begin this enchanting journey together. I wasn't a paranormal enthusiast or believer, and believed I would stay this way until proven wrong. I guess. But I'm pretty easily spooked, I suppose, and always thought that I'd end up crying or screaming if I encountered a ghost. My theory is that my body just went into extreme fear after this thing came into my room and simply shut down, hence the passing out. I do think about this pretty often, though, and I always get chills when I think about it. I'd love to hear what everyone here thinks about this. Their thoughts, theories, etc. I've never gone back to that place and I don't intend to either. But if you live around there or if you've had any experience with things around there, then I would love to know. This happened to me last year. So I was up late working on an art project in my living room, the windows wide open. I lived in the first floor apartment. Very often do I felt as if something or someone was watching me, and it knew that I knew, and I got the feeling that I was not supposed to know, if that makes sense. It felt like someone was directly outside of my window, though, staring straight at me, unwavering anyway. It was probably about 1 or 2 in the morning at this point, when I heard what sounded like a very distant cry for help from a woman. This calling was so quiet that it was just barely audible. That's how far away it sounded. But at the same time I couldn't shake this eerie feeling that it was actually quite close. It was really confusing, and I chalked it up to exhaustion and that it was probably all in my head. But then, just as the screaming stopped, I heard a voice so clear, so close, so haunting, whispered directly into my ear. I could almost feel their cold breath, and it said, "I know you can hear me," this voice, although only a whisper echoed throughout the room. It was so articulate as well. I mean, there was no mistaking that it was a message whatsoever. Undeniable. And that whatever this thing was, it was right there next to me and I could hear it. Every now and then I think about this, and it always chills me to the bone, even a year later afterward. This was like nothing I'd ever experienced in my entire life. And even now I can't fully articulate the fear that shook me to my core because of this. The juxtaposition of it. All to like the distant screams were so quiet. But that was the loudest whisper that I'd ever heard. And I can assure you that there was absolutely nobody there. I want to tell my sister's potentially paranormal story from about 4 years ago. It's the most potent story that I've heard from somebody that I know personally. So she was working in the cafe at John House in Hampshire, UK, a grade-listed mod house. It has a Wikipedia page, if you want to check it out. It was the evening I must have been working an event or something, and she was upstairs alone. When the door, now this is a big 3-plus-year-old heavy wooden door, so I think we can discount the wind catching its one open and closed again, except nobody walked in. What makes it creepier is that this door is key-coded, so there's really no way of opening it unless the code is typed in clearly. This made my sister slightly nervous, as she had heard that the house was haunted before, but she carried on with what she was doing on the till. But then the till started working by itself, buttons being pressed erratically, and whatever she did, she just couldn't stop it. At this point she started to really panic. She hates the paranormal. When the matter manager walked in, she took my sister outside into the yard to try and calm her down and explain the old classic. "Oh yes, that's Lady XYZ of the house, and she likes to roam the floor when all the old-style outdoor lights in the yard started to dim and come back again." Well, that was the last straw for my sister, so she told the manager to heck with this, handed over her apron and bolted down the long driveway back to her car in the dock. I asked her, "But weren't you scared to run down that driveway in the dark after all of that?" And she replied, "No. I just wanted to get the heck away from that place. It's something that we still talk about often, and whenever I think about it, always bothers me. So I'd like to tell you about an experience that I had recently that honestly disturbed me. I don't know if it was real, a nightmare or something else, but I cannot explain it. So first of all, you need to know that my bedroom and my mother's bedroom are opposite each other. So from my door I can see my mother's bedroom, which is at the end of the corridor. What's more, my window faces my door and therefore my corridor. It was the middle of and the moon was shining brightly night, so it was quite easy to see the bedroom and the corridor without too much difficulty. During the night, I woke up and was facing my window, curled up on top of myself. That was when I saw a face opposite my bed that I could well describe to you. It was a young man, I'd say in his 20s, with a fairly thin face and hollow cheeks. He had red hair, short, with curls on top. The most terrifying thing about him, though, was that he was looking towards my bedroom door with a horrified look frozen on his face. I mean, he didn't move an inch as if it was a painting that I was seeing. But he looked so real at that moment, I had a feeling of terror that ran through my body. I was still curled up and I didn't dare move or turn around towards my door, where the young man was looking. My body was telling me not to move. My eyes were glued to the side and I just couldn't move. My body froze and I felt sick to my stomach, and I had the feeling that if I moved, something serious was going to happen. I stayed like that for a few minutes and then, at one point, it was completely calm. The young man was gone and it was quiet, maybe a little too quiet actually, like the calm you feel when you realize what had just happened. After that, though, I couldn't contain myself from turning back towards my corner, and that's when I caught sight of the silhouette. It was transparent, but it was as if you could see the outline of its silhouette. It's hard to explain, but the only thing that I know is that when I looked at this thing, I didn't feel at all comfortable, and I was even a little bit scared. After all of that, I didn't look far and went back to sleep as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until the next day that I thought about it again and I spoke to my mother about it. But she couldn't come up with an explanation either. And that's why I'm here. Do you guys have any idea what this could have been? So this was about 3.5 years ago, but I think about it pretty much every day. So I'll start by saying that I was not being very smart. Yeah, I know that. So I was in Miami with a friend who was now my boyfriend, and we were vacationing or blowing off some steam. I was 28. He was 25. We are both gay, and I decided to download Grindr and see what was going on. Long story short, I met a guy and went to his place for some fun. We had at it and I had a good time and we had some drinks. I was feeling great. It was about 11 p.m. at night and time to wrap up and head back to the hotel. I saw that it was about a mile walk literally straight down the road. So I hit out, and well, I had taken some Adderall and was feeling a little more reckless than I normally am and decided maybe I would hook up with somebody else. I know, but I logged back on Grindr and instantly connect with a really hot guy. He invites me over, gives me his address and also says that he could come and pick me up. So I'm just standing there on the edge of this sidewalk, wondering if I'm going to get picked up or call an Uber to this location or just go home and someone pulls up in a truck and says that they're here to pick me up. I'm like, oh wow, you came. That's really nice. I literally remember looking at the picture and at the guy and feeling very confident that they were the same person. So I hopped in the truck. Instantly. Though, I just had the weirdest feeling rush over me. The truck smelled weird too. First of all, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like the taste of licking iron. Maybe I was instantly turned off and felt really weird about that. Though anyway, he starts driving. Thankfully, I didn't close out the Grindr wrap when he pulled up, because it was so abrupt. Because I looked down and literally noticed that I'm getting further away from the guy that I was talking to, which means that they were not the same person. But this guy looked exactly like this person. But the weirdest thing was that this guy looked exactly like the person's profile. I remember that I just started texting and talking, being like, I really like your blonde hair. Your gray truck is really cool. Is this a 2014 Chevy Silverado? I just told my friends about you and have to be home by 12 p.m. Just FYI, but we can go to my hotel. They'd love to meet you if you like. Trying to make it seem like I have people waiting on me, that I disclosed parts of his identity, anything really. This lasted about 2 to 3 minutes, until eventually he just pulled over and said that he wasn't feeling like hanging out anymore. I got out and he left, and I got in an Uber and went home to this day. Though, I really do think that I was picked up by someone who saw an easy target. But thankfully I was slightly resourceful in the moment, enough to get me out of, well, whatever that was a few years back. I, a 23-year-old female, was driving home after taking my dad to the airport for a late flight. It was already dark when I left the airport and I still had a 3-hour drive home ahead of me. I get recalculated to some windy back road highway. There were no cars or street lights, and so it was a pretty dark and creepy road. As I turned a curve, I noticed a black car come out of nowhere and start to ride my bumper in the blue lights. The road was so dark that I had to drive for a minute to find a spot with at least a few small lights where I could pull over. The officer came up to my window and asked me if I knew that my tags were expired. I thought that was kind of odd because I was driving my mom's car and she's usually pretty on top of things like that. But it was more so the way that he talked that made me uneasy. I guess he was speaking pretty fast, like he was in a hurry or something. He's standing at my window, and before he even gets my license or registration number, his radio beeps and he tells me that he has to go on another call. He then practically runs back to the car and speeds off. I head back home half weirded out and half thanking God that I didn't get a ticket. I kind of brush it off until I go outside to my car the next day, and I find that my tags were not due to expire for at least another 2 months. It could have been a simple mistake. I did that, but I couldn't help but recall how weird the whole incident was. I mean, he could have misread the number. That's possible, I guess, but looking back, I wonder what could have happened if he was someone with bad intentions. Was it just a mistake? Or was he a fake cop that was trying to lure people out of their car or something? From then on, I always pull over only in the well-populated areas, and if a safe option is unavailable, I call 911 to make them aware, because something tells me that there was just not something right about that whole situation. This is a story of someone that I knew and had to cut ties with, because, well, he was an absolute psycho. The first half will be in context as to why I cut him off, and the second half is what makes this story really creepy. So it all started about 4 years ago, when I was living in a friend's house while attending a nearby university. It was myself, my friend, his sister, and their parent. Roughly about 2 weeks into staying there, my friend's sister invited her boyfriend to live in the house too. And by all accounts, he was a pretty cool guy at first, very sociable and full of great stories. We often sat around the table for drinks or talked about life, having a smoke in the garden. Within the first month, however, as he started to get comfortable, cracks started to show in this veneer. He would rant about government conspiracies, how he was always around the party. He was big into, like Sigma, male stuff and martial arts, and he did have a temper as well. He had this big dog that he always kept in a cage that was extremely violent. When he wasn't around, the dog actually attacked his girlfriend and had to be put down. That was when the guilt trips towards her began and the ranting became incessant. About 2 months later, he had the bright idea to live in a shipping container, mainly because the parents wanted him out, and dragged his girlfriend along for the ride. I'm not talking about one of those sort of chic little restoration jobs. This was a rented container in a storage yard among the outskirts of the town that we were living in. He would intimidate and threaten the staff there constantly until they called the police too. This, of course, was another conspiracy. He became increasingly abusive to his girlfriend as well, to the point where the family got involved to get her out of there. I stuck close to them, having to pretend to be on his side until we could safely get her out. They broke up, which she blamed me for, claiming that I was poisoning her against him to make her mine. She has a new partner now and they're really happy, so it was never about that. We all blocked the psycho ex on everything possible, but he continued to harass them until eventually he disappeared, or so we thought. You see, fast forward to last year. I started to receive messages over social media from several different accounts, blocking each one in turn. When I discovered who it was, some friendly and some hostile. One of these profiles, however, was pretending to be someone that I knew from university. We talked about life and how things were going, and eventually I was invited to a house party, claiming that it was a free house and plenty of people were coming. I booked the time off work, made my travel plans, and kept talking to this friend coming up to the date of the party. I mentioned it to my friend's sister, and she was interested in going herself until I mentioned the address and she panicked. The address in question was a property belonging to the crazy ex's father that was scheduled for sale. Claiming that I suspected a break-in, and they found 5 people there, including the ex, and parked at the front was a butcher's van equipped for food storage and a pretty hefty collection of knives, hammers, and rope. And boy, am I really glad that I didn't do. I live pretty far from, well, anyone and mostly surrounded by forests. I hunt regularly, and I spend a lot of time outside when not running my business. It was early during the hunting season, and around 3 in the morning I was tracking deer prints, and they just stopped, and an uneasy feeling filled me, as something compelled me to look up. And what I did in a tree was the deer, or what was left of it, was gutted, but not like how a human hunter would have done it. So I decided to just call it there and head back. As I was making my way back to my truck, I really felt uneasy, though, and as if I was being watched. I would periodically look back and check with my nods, and caught the very big and very high up eyes looking back, followed by a type of deep yell, not a roar or scream, but an actual yell. It didn't sound like a bear or a big cat, but almost like a very big man. Well, as you can imagine, I took off running and I didn't look back. It was a 4-mile run back to my truck, and I didn't stop once. When I made it back and I drove off, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw again something standing, silhouetted by the sunrise. When I made it home, I was still shaking up a bit, and I decided to look over my truck. Now I'm a fairly big guy, standing at 66 and weighing about 130. And that was when I noticed that there were handprints bigger than my own hands on my truck. Doing some more investigating, I checked my trail cams and found several offline, and one pointed at the deer hung up in the tree. Now, being someone who's seen a lot of horror movies and being one not to mess with something that I can't understand, I never went back to that part of the forest, and eventually decided to move altogether, as at night I would still hear that yell. Sometimes my wife would tell me that she felt like someone was watching her from the tree line as well, and being a new parent, I just didn't want to take any chances. I still have no idea what all of that was about, but I'm really glad that we moved. So my family has a house that was custom built for them. The house is 15 years old, and I mean there shouldn't be any paranormal activity, right, Tron? I've been seeing shadow figures since 12 years old. I've heard voices scratching on walls and slamming on windows. My room is 3 stories up, so it had to be coming from inside as well. But there's one experience in particular that I'll never forget. I was getting ready for middle school, walking through our hallway from our kitchen to the front door. I saw a shadow cast by from behind me, but it was still dark outside, so I didn't pay much mind. but the person must have been between me and the light from our kitchen. I called out everybody's name that lives in the house, but I got no response at that. I ran to my mom's car and explained to her what had happened. That's when she told me that she has seen them too, and they're apparently only around occasionally. I thought that she was joking at first, until she actively started saying, "Hey, hey, there's a shadow by the door," etc. We still have what we like to call visitors. Some seem to be playful, some wander, and some only stop by once. We'll have a period of 2 to 4 months where we won't see anything. They usually only stay for like 1 day to 1 week. My brother considered himself an atheist until he started seeing figures as well. Now we're definitely both agnostic. The only reason that I believe that our house is haunted is because any land that could be considered a burial ground for Native Americans might be here, and who knows. Unfortunately, we might have built our house on top of one. I recently stayed the night at my childhood home. It's an old house built in the 19th century. I never felt at ease in that house. It's always just had a really eerie vibe to it. When I was 17, my parents told me that they were able to afford this house mansion because the previous owners desperately wanted to get rid of it. The reason being is that, unfortunately, their son had hung himself in the attic. Lots of paranormal things have happened to me in that house too, but I'll give you full details of my last encounter. So it happened last week. I stayed the night there because I had a football game that was close to where my parents were living. I didn't feel like waking up super early, so that's why I held a sleepover in my old bedroom. I went to sleep fairly early, around 10 p.m. or so. Not much later than that. Everything felt pretty normal. I made sure that all the doors were locked. My parents were on a wellness retreat in Germany, and my brother moved out a while ago, so it was just me in the house at that time. I went to sleep feeling comfortable and quite at ease, even though I was cautious given the history of the house. I texted some of my friends good night, and that was it. The comfortable feeling, though, suddenly wore off when I was awoken at 3 in the morning because I heard music playing, but it was muffled. I couldn't hear it clearly, but my first instinct was that it was a car playing music, with its windows closed, parked on the street. Perhaps I said to myself, I'll give it 10 minutes and the car will pass. But the music was still playing 10 minutes later, and I felt annoyed and, quite frankly, a bit ticked off. I had to wake up early in the morning after all, and this was ruining my sleep. I walked to my bedroom window to see where the music was coming from, ready to throw a fit at whoever was doing it. I opened my blinds, opened the window to look outside, and that was the exact moment that my stomach dropped, because there was no car, nor was there anyone else outside. I realized then that the music was coming from upstairs in the attic. My parents renovated the attic 5 years ago and made it into their bedroom. I knew that it had a radio on my mother's bedside. She never used it, though. Most of the time it just wasn't even plugged in because she had only one socket, and she used it to charge her phone. It was not a new radio by any means. Early 2000s, I would guess. My mom held on to it because it was the radio of her departed father, and she just couldn't get rid of it. I was freaking out, though. I mean, why would these kind of encounters only happen when I was alone at home? I tried calling my parents, but they didn't pick up. My brother didn't pick up either, not surprising, since it was 3 in the morning. I realized that I would have to deal with this situation alone, so I decided to open the door of my bedroom that led up to the hallway. At the end of the hallway there was a circling stair that led up to the attic. I opened my bedroom door and the music suddenly became louder, and I now could clearly hear which music was playing. I'd never felt so scared as I did then. I didn't want to do this alone. I had one last rescue line that I could call. It was my friend Philip. He played COD with me until the early hours, so he surely was still awake. I called him and explained the situation. He reassured me that it was probably a problem with an electric outlet that had started that radio or something. I felt reassured by his answers and made the walk upstairs to the attic. I was with him on the phone the whole time, and I stood in front of the door and I could clearly hear the music. Now it was so loud as well. I knew that I had to get him to turn it off, but I was absolutely petrified. Philip reassured me that everything was going to be all right and it was just faulty wiring. I kept telling myself that repeatedly, that it was just faulty wiring as well. Eventually I mustered up the courage and I opened up the door. And as soon as I did that, music immediately stopped. My friend also heard it stop as well, and at that I instantly ran downstairs, put on all the lights and watched Trailer Park Boys until 7 in the morning. The next day I played the worst football game that I had ever played. We lost 7-0. So to start this, I usually have sleep paralysis at least once every 2 weeks. I've had it my whole life, so I pretty much am used to it. Now I either close my eyes and go back to sleep, or sometimes I can find it and sort of snap out of it anyway. Yesterday I checked into my hotel, laid out my clothes and sat my backpack down on the extra couch hotels usually have. I left and grabbed dinner. When I got back I noticed the TV was on. I never turned it on. When I first got to my hotel, I didn't really think much of it and brushed it off. I chilled for a while and then fell asleep by 9-ish. I woke up randomly at 3 in the morning, but in sleep paralysis again. I was sleeping on my side, and as soon as I opened my eyes there, she was a random woman sitting on my couch, so elegant looking in the perfect posture. My heartbeat rose, and I locked my eyes with her. For some reason I was scared. I wanted to snap out of my paralysis because I genuinely thought that somebody had broken in or something. But it just seemed a little bit off this time. It was just the way that she was sitting and what she was wearing. I guess all white, with her straight, long, brushed hair looking dead straight. She wasn't moving, just straight up, existing but not existing at the same time. But this was the moment that I knew that something was very wrong. But my fear grew and I thought that if I snapped out of my paralysis, she would hear me. But when I say that I can snap out of it, I really mean snap my body to the left or right to fully wake myself up. But in the end I went with the second option. I just closed my eyes and went back to sleep. I woke up at around 6 in the morning and it took me a minute or two to remember what I had seen just a few hours before I shot up and looked beside my bed in my bathroom. Just anywhere. To look to see if she was hiding anywhere. Just because it was daytime and I was not in paralysis, I was ready to kick some butt, I guess. But it wasn't until I saw my couch that caused my confidence to drain pretty quickly. You see, some of my things that I set on side the couch the day prior were suddenly reorganized in a way where one side of the couch was pushed to the other side, but neatly in a way to where someone could sit on the other side. I guess I inspected the side where I saw her sitting, and I could immediately tell the difference, as there was still an imprint, or the cushion being lower than the other, which also means that it was fresh. Whoever she was, she had been sitting there for quite some time. So, to begin, I would appreciate any input as to what you think this could have been, whether you believe it was a person or something paranormal. I would really just hate any input at all. So on Tuesday, my best friend S and her roommates D and J were talking about our old high school at some point. Our school was built on top of a burial ground, and several students who have gone to that school there have passed away tragically unrelated to the school. And well, they decided to break in at 3 in the morning to explore what the school was like. Now we're 20, so we graduated only 2 years ago. Jay was scared and didn't want to go inside. So she stayed in my friend's car on the driver's seat in case they all needed to leave quickly. S and her other roommate, T, decided to jump the gate and go exploring. They thought that the energy seemed kind of scary, but they were too curious and kept walking. They reached this one classroom in the back, and that's when my friend looked inside. As she said, the lights in the hallways were red, and when she looked into the classroom, she said that she saw a black silhouette of a person in the classroom close to the door. She said that, even though she couldn't make out a face, she felt that it was watching them. She grabbed T and told her calmly that they needed to leave because someone was there, and they sprinted back to the car and they all left. They then went to our old middle school to see what it looked like now. They couldn't get in because the gates were unlocked, so Jay asked Sess if she wants to get back into the driver's seat. Since it's her car and S declines, Jay pulls out and leaves. It's about 3:30 to 3:45 in the morning. At this point, as she pulls out and starts driving back to their apartment, they see these two white blinding lights coming towards them. They couldn't tell if it was a car since the lights were so bright, but 2 seconds later they realized that it was a wrong-way driver coming at them at about 80 mph, and Jay was able to swerve around at last second, as the car just zoomed straight past them without realizing. Luckily, they saw cops pulled over on the side of the road ahead. They told the cops and they immediately dispatched someone to go follow the car and find where they were. They were silent for the rest of the night because of how terrifying the experience was. But the scary part is that last week a girl who just graduated from our high school was driving up to Maryland for Thanksgiving with her parents to visit her brother, who happened to be in our grade, and they swerved into the southbound lane and died in a head-on collision. S was telling her roommates about it right before they left the middle school and almost died. She's convinced that she saw a person at the school, but isn't sure if it was a real person or something else. Our school doesn't have late security or cleaners or anything, and I'm not sure why, but when she told me the story I felt a strong gut feeling that it was something else. The night just felt to perfectly lined up as well. I mean, the whole thing was really weird. I do believe that humans are scarier than anything paranormal, but my gut just tells me that she encountered something else and that the events that transpired throughout the night were somehow related to it. But again, if anyone could give any input or insights as to what this could have been, then I would really appreciate it. Thanks. I was somewhere between the age of 10 and 14 when this happened. Growing up, I lived on a very boring street in a middle-class one-story house. My bedroom faced the front veranda, which had a lot of plants on it. Just around the corner and down the hall from my bedroom was a study that was used as a spare room or a computer room. Now I used to watch TV in that room, and on this particular night it was very hot, so I had opened the door to the veranda. There was a thin fly screen with no lock which we could pull across when the door was open. When I went to bed that night, it was so hot that I kept my bedroom windows and curtains wide open. I was having trouble sleeping and I just laid there staring at the ceiling for some time. But then I heard what sounded like someone walking around on the veranda. The ground was cement pebbles and there was a lot of dirt from the plants there, and it made a very distinct sound when you walked on it. At first I assumed it was one of my parents, but it was very late at night and that wouldn't have made much sense. So I craned my neck to look at the window, and in the dark I saw a skeletal hunched over figure slowly shuffling towards my bedroom window. It made a sort of raspy sound as it shuffled around. I was fairly certain that it couldn't see me, but from the way its head was moving, it looked like it was searching for something. Now this might sound weird, but despite this fairly creepy thing happening outside of my bedroom window, I still felt somehow safe in the comfort of my bed inside my locked house. But then I realized that I had left the study door open, which meant that all that stood between, well, whatever the heck this thing was in my house was a thin screen door with no lock. I knew that I had to lock the door, and quickly. This thing was almost at my bedroom window and would soon be at the study door. I slid out of bed and crawled on my stomach out of my room and down the hall to the study. And as I reached the door intending to quickly close it, I suddenly realized my mistake. I would have to open the screen door in order to reach the door to close it. From where I was laying, I could see this thing hunched over and peering into my bedroom window. I think it hurt or sensed me laying there because it turned and shuffled over and bent down to where I was laying. I held my breath as this thing put its face against the screen and peered in at me. Its raspy breath sounded like death as well. In the dark, I could make out a part of her face and, whatever it was, it looked gaunt, sickly, either very thin or no skin. I couldn't see any eyes, or they were simply empty sockets. Perhaps I didn't dare move as its face pressed up against the fly screen, seemingly looking right at me. Suddenly, though, its face distorted in terror. Its eye sockets and mouth opened wide and it just let out this curdling shriek. A shriek that sounded like fear, and that it just bolted off into the night. I lay there silently, frozen in fear and disbelief over what the heck had just happened, and also listening intently to make sure that it was actually gone. As soon as I dared to move, I quickly opened the fly screen and shut and locked that veranda door. I then went back to my room and shut the window and drew the curtains. I kept peeking through the curtain, expecting for it to come back, but it never did. Now I've thought about this encounter ever since then, and I've never really been sure what to make of it. I've never told anyone about it either. I didn't know where to begin, and I've never really understood why it reacted in fear when it saw me like that. It is still one of the most unexplainable and strangest things that has ever happened to me, and I don't know what to think about it. So before I get into this story, I would like to affirm that everything said is unreal. In the following months, I've been trying to debunk this in any way possible, but I've been unsuccessful. This story takes place in Charleston, South Carolina. Specifically, I love the Palms. During a family vacation in September of 2023. We stayed in a rental home that I won't name for privacy or potential legal reasons. Just a few steps away from the ocean, though I shared a room with my mother, which had the twin-sized beds. And, to start off, the moment that we arrived at this vacation home, the door slammed shut by itself, almost smashing my grandmother's hand. Now this could be explained by the door being heavy, I guess, but that doesn't explain why. Every night we stayed at this location, the doors would open and close themselves. It didn't matter if the doors were locked, had stuff in the way, etc. The main culprit of the door opening and closing was my bedroom door, and I was sick at this time and had a very poor sleep schedule, so I would usually stay up at really odd hours anyway. My mother was staying in the same room as me, and she would lock the door every night, so I didn't make any noise to wake her up without fail. However, that door would always slam open. I would close it again. Then an hour or so later, it would slam open again. This even happened right in front of me a few times as well, which really freaked me out. Please no, too, that the opening and closing was not limited to that one door. Every door in the place would do this. Just mine was more prevalent than the others. I guess, for example, my grandparents' room opened just to creak and stop the second that I looked at it. But anyway, at around our 5th day of our stay, I was pretty tired. After returning from a large dinner, I decided that it would be best to try and take a short nap while the rest of my family went out to the beach for a while. This would turn out to be a huge mistake. Everyone left one by one, and I could hear the large door open and close as each person left. The house was quiet for around 30 minutes. I had not yet fallen asleep, but I had covered my head in a blanket, something that usually helped me to fall asleep in the day. After a short time under this blanket, I felt what I can only describe as a depression in the bed. A very distinct sensation of someone sitting with their hands on each side of their body. Keep in mind, this is a very small twin-sized bed. If there were one of my family members, I would be able to feel them brush against my body and, however, the only thing that I felt was the indentations on the bed. From what I could tell, it felt like a small woman sitting down, not a lot of weight, but just enough to definitely be able to feel them sitting next to me. They said nothing, did nothing, didn't even move, and they shocked me. Obviously, after a few minutes, whatever it was making the indentation on the bed seemed to stand up and just leave. I did end up falling asleep after this, by some miracle. However, my fever had gotten much worse at this point as well, and that's pretty much it. Please do let me know if you have any ideas or similar experiences. I would say that I'm more of a skeptic, but honestly, this was kind of crazy to me. If anyone has any questions, then I'd be happy to answer. But like I said, I've been racking my brain over this for some time now, and I really just cannot explain this. So I'm a logger in northern BC, Canada. I'm an avid hunter and have spent many a nights hunting alone. That being said, quite a few years ago I was working on a broken down skidder in the dark after everyone on the logging block was gone, changing a blown hydraulic hose under the cab when I felt like I was being just washed or something. The feeling continued to get worse too, and so I was sort of on edge and continued to work on replacing the blown hose. Every trip for tools to the service truck and back, I would sort of scan for eyes. In the nearby tree line, maybe about 25 m away with my flashlight, there was nothing. I continued to work on the pain in the butt hose that you literally have to dive your head and upper body under the cab to reach until your legs are sort of stuck up in the air and feeling vulnerable, and the feeling of being watched gets even more intense. All the hairs on my neck are standing and I hear a two-tone whistle from far away, almost as if it was the wind. It was so far away, but it was flat and calm that day. Also, there was about 6 inches of fresh snow on the ground. But I pushed myself out from under the skidder and looked around quietly with a flashlight for eyes. The tree line and down the road again, there's nothing. I had one side of the hose fitting to remove still, and it was the easiest side higher up. So I wasn't but up in the air trying to remove it. I put my head back under the cab and quickly began to spin the fitting loose. And the feeling of being washed was now so bad that every hair on my body was standing. And then I hear the same two-tone whistle very loud in the tree line directly behind me. I had the hose off at the exact same time, so I whipped myself out from under the cabin, turned ready to throw down with a .58 wrench in my hand, yelling, all right, where are you?" But there was nothing. No one there, no tracks, no eyes, no wind either. In fact, no sound whatsoever. Which was really strange. The flashlight that I had was more of a small floodlight for working on repair stuff, so it didn't really light up inside the trees or anything. But the next day it had snowed another 6 inches or so. I went up and hiked the tree line with a 12 gauge and 7.3 and slugs ready to go. But there were no tracks that I could see. No perches on the trees where snow had been pushed off or anything. If it was a bird, nothing. But I definitely heard someone whistle or make a whistling sound of some sort. As I said, I'm an avid hunter and animals just don't make that sort of noise. I don't know. The whole situation was really weird and I don't know what to think about it. Maybe I'm just overreacting and maybe it was an animal. One that I just haven't come across yet. Or something. In any case, years later, this all happened about maybe 7 km down the road from the last incident. I was out hunting with a friend when we lost legal light, so we hiked back to the truck and we hit the road in. His parents' new Ford Heron, the ones with the sensors all over the vehicle. We had some music playing, as we're just heading back towards town again when the music started acting sort of weird and cutting in and out with static. So me, being in the passenger seat, disconnected the Bluetooth and reconnected the phone. Music cleared up and we continued down the road. We got up to the kilometer board on the road that my previous encounter took place and I mentioned, "Oh hey, that's the whistle block that we logged a couple of years back." half jokingly because I couldn't make heads or tails out of it. My friend replied, "Great, thanks for that," as I told him the story before. But we continued slowly driving down the road because it gets pretty rough in a couple of spots and the road has a few sharp turns and ant sand as well. We go about a kilometer further and the music starts screeching and doing what we can only describe as like alien noises. So I disconnect the Bluetooth again and my friend says, "Oh, Mom's got a cord in here somewhere." So he stops and gets the cord for me. I plug the phone in and play the music again another kilometer down the road and the phone just goes absolutely mental. I mean like loud aliens squealing and sounds similar to that terrible dial-up internet noise from the 90s. We had started into the sand when this was happening and we shut the music off completely as we were driving, still making the one half of the S-turn. And then we both look up from the music deck or screen and the headlight illuminates what I can only describe as a figure standing in the middle of the road. So we swerve and take the digibit still going probably, I don't know, like 30 km an hour, and get the truck back up on the road. We continue coasting down the road as we're both in awe, after just seeing a flash of whatever this thing was. And I finally say, after what seemed like 5 quiet minutes, "Man, did you just see that?" My friend cuts me off and says, "A skeleton in the middle of the road." I say, "Yeah, like a white rib cage and a deer skull for a face." Almost he finishes. I said, "Turn around. What was that? Does someone need our help?" Not thinking that we're in the middle of nowhere, with no vehicles around, mind you, or any that we had passed from other hunters or anything. It was early season and no one Balhan says here anyways. My friend said, "I'm not turning around, man. I feel sick like I'm about to throw up." And he continued driving, thankfully without throwing up. We didn't see another vehicle until we hit pavement again. So whatever this thing was, it was taller than the pickup by easily a couple of feet. I'm 61, and my forehead is at the top of the window. For reference, it is black surrounding the white of the bones, with sort of long arms half stretched to its side, and it was standing there as if to say, "Try and hit me." I watched this thing be the passenger window and stared up at as we wailed by it, and it was definitely 3-dimensional tall, with long arms and incredibly dark, dead looking, sort of like, I don't know. Maybe it was just my eyes, but like, light was sort of sucked into it without reflecting anything. Hard to explain, but that's the best way I can put it. When we hit service again, though, my friend received a text message from his mother saying, "What did you? 2 idiots hit in my brand new truck." I guess the new for send near accident reports to the owner when the sensors pick up something. I'm an old school Chevy guy, so I don't really know much about this. But the only thing that I can find online that resembles what we both saw, and I know this is pretty cringe, but is well a Wendigo just without the antlers. Or just that the headlights perhaps didn't illuminate them or something. So I live with my dog and my roommate in a 1-story duplex. I've got a fenced-in yard in the private spot where my car is accessible via an alleyway, with a bunch of massive signs saying no parking, no trespassing, private property, and whatnot. So I was sitting in my bedroom, playing games, and it was around 12 or 1 in the morning, and my dog, sitting on the couch in the living room, started barking at something outside. Every now and then she does this because there's a squirrel or a bush moved or something. So I get up to go and shush her, and I open the blinds on the window to say, see, there's nothing outside. But actually there's something outside. Through the fence I can see the headlights of a car idling out in the front of my house and lights sort of bobbing around outside what appears to be people walking around in front of my yard by my car with flashlights looking around in the middle of the night. Mind you, for full disclosure, I was also kind of stoned, and I'm not sure if it's a reverse effect, because my sober self is an anxiety-ridden creature living under a blanket who was too scared to send any mail to my manager. But my high self is Fred from Scooby-Doo, pretty much as in, "Come on gang, let's solve the mystery." So I decide that I'll just go out there and investigate. I let my dog out with my pajama wearing an armed breast self out there and my yard is fence. So my dog cannot go to them without me opening the gate. But she does keep barking and step outside and I go to the gate. I can now see it's a well-dressed woman and a man in a sort of nicer, newer model car. They're walking around the front yard with flashlights and I go, hey, this is private property. Can you please leave? The woman seems kind of startled and says, oh sorry. Our car broke down. The man gets in the car and she walks around. Goes back in the car. They talk for a while. I'm really not sure what else to do at this point. So I just kind of stand there watching for what felt like ages. But maybe it was only a minute or two. I don't know how long it actually was. But they seem to be deciding what to do and he starts the car back up. They pull out. Proceed to drive around. Pull into the public street and behind my neighbor's car. Instead, I decided to sit outside from my porch and kind of watch them to make sure that they didn't get out and start investigating the neighbor's car instead. And they never popped the hood of their car, mind you, or got out, which seemed to run fine when they drove off. By the way, I never saw them come back either. A couple of notes here too is that there are loads of spots you can park in and around my neighborhood. That would not be on clearly private property with better lighting. And you do not need to be near other cars there too. But to get to where my car is parked, you've got to drive down an alleyway and look for a spot. Like my friends have trouble finding it. The car was like a newer model sports car. Mind you, not saying that those can't ever break down. But I guess that I'd be less suspect if they just rolled up and I don't know, like a G Metro Mini Cooper or an old Subaru hatchback or something. And we're like, oh man, my terrible car broke down. When I saw it up the next day, though, I was like I either just politely told some car thieves to stop attempting robbery on me, and they did, or I made someone's terrible night even worse. I mean, they didn't seem to be dressed for stealing a car, more like a party or a date night. The woman was in heels, for instance, and I really don't know much about cars. So maybe they really did just break down and the spot next to my car was the closest they could find or something. Then I maybe spooked them even more by taking neighborhood watch a little too far. I guess if I parked in a neighborhood and a half-naked woman and a possibly big scary dog came outside to stare at me in the middle of the night, I'd probably get out of there too. But I don't know, something about the whole situation just didn't sit well with me. I mean, why did they have torches out like that, and what were they looking for? It just seems really strange and doesn't seem to match up with anything that I can come up with. So I'm having some very strange things happening to me lately that are really starting to legitimately scare me now. I live on a farm in the middle of SCUSA, and I'm a cigarette smoker. So I go outside at random times at night, and I usually am okay with it, just usual sounds. But every once in a while I hear something like strange noises, but just sort of brush it off. But lately, within the past month, it's gotten a heck of a lot worse. For instance, I'll be sitting on the porch and I can hear voices of people talking which sound very close, which is obviously unnerving to say the least. But last night it was way worse. The voices started sounding like people I know, which they don't live anywhere near me. They live in other parts of the country or in different countries altogether. And well, the other night it sounded like someone was approaching me from my right. And it kept getting closer until I stood up and I pulled my pocket knife out and went to the stairs on the porch, and as I did that, whatever it was ran. It sounded like the FD running off into the woods. Last night, though, it got super close, whatever it was like at the end of the porch, and I also heard breathing. It was terrifying, so I just instantly went inside. I got curious at this point, though, and video chatted my girlfriend. I went back out and we were listening together, and I swear that I heard something that I've never heard around here at all. I heard a little kid singing, which eventually turned into an adult laughing. And then, like 2 minutes of wailing that moved slowly through the woods just out of sight. so I couldn't see who it was. She didn't hear it, which obviously she's on video chat. So maybe she just didn't hear it. Or I don't know. Maybe I'm going mad or something. I don't know if I'm being messed with by people or something more serious, or if it's just my own mental health. If anyone has any ideas of what this is, then please let me know, because I'm almost at the point of just getting in my car and leaving and never coming back. Also, I forgot to add, too, that there's a cemetery at the end of our yard which I believe has 2 children and 2 adults. Judging by the size of the tombstones, whoever they are, those tombstones are really old, and I don't know if that means anything or if, like I said, perhaps I'm just losing it. So I, a 25-year-old female, have always remembered these experiences from my childhood as the most confusing and scary times growing up. My brother is 3 years younger than me, and this all started happening when he was around 4 or 5. We can call my brother B and B. As a child had health problems and needed a lot of different surgeries that he was in and out of hospital, often with the way my mom will retell. This all started with my brother having a horrendous night terrors, so bad that he would sit upright in bed with a blood-curdling scream, thrashing his arms and legs around. When B would wake up, he would have no recollection of his dream, but as time went on, B started to talk to someone at night and his toy fire trucks would start to light up, with the siren going off too. My mom would wake up in the morning and the clocks would all be set to 2:15 a.m., which was really weird. In our house too, we had a storage room under the stairs. The storage room was right next to B and E's playroom. B would always say that John and his mom lived in that storage room, and he would go and knock on the door and say, "Hi, John's mom. Can John come and play with me and my sister?" I never really thought too much of it being a child and my parents telling B that he had an imaginary friend. B would want us to set up an extra plate for John at the dinner table, buckle him into the car, etc., and would freak out completely if my parents didn't comply. We had weird things going on in the house, though, too. My baby dolls would go off non-stop, to the point that my mom took the batteries out and shoved the dolls in the bottom of the toy box, and one in specific still went off, even without batteries, which I didn't even know how that's possible. We also had this motion sense, a big bird plushie that constantly went off when nobody was in the room, and the toy would be turned off all the time too. This went on for at least a year, I think so. And my mama said that the breaking point was my brother crying in the kitchen, saying him and John apparently got into a fight with B saying, "I told JM that we can't be friends anymore because I have bones, and he doesn't that." Same night too, I woke up to a woman calling my name and standing at the side of my bed. When I rolled over and opened my eyes, she immediately asked me, "Where's John?" I didn't reply and she seemed to get upset and asked again, "Where's John?" I again didn't reply and was so scared that I just rolled over and closed my eyes hoping that it would go away. When I rolled back over, she was gone. I remember I booked it into my parents' room. My mom let me sleep in their bed for the night. But the next night I remember my mom talking to a priest and another strange man. My mom has since told me that the priest was there to bless the house and the other man was a medium to help John and his mom cross over. The medium was able to tell my mom that John and his mom had passed away in a house fire, which has always messed with me, because the main toy that went off was Beast Fire Truck. Remember, it was set off. Almost every night was John trying to tell us something, but apparently he had attached himself to be the last time he had surgery. After the blessing and the encounter with the medium, John and his mom were never encountered again. Not even by my brother. I really don't know what to make of most of it, but all I can say is that if John and his mom were not just imaginary, then I do hope that they found their way to the light. So basically, I was raised very Christian, strict Christian, and have never really believed in ghosts, but I do believe in demonic entities or something that is definitely evil. Now that I'm older, I'm still on the fence about believing in ghosts and things that are spirits of dead. People roaming about that have no ill intent. Even with this belief, though, I still loved a good horror movie and admitted that a lot of other people's encounters were hard to explain. If the paranormal entity in question seemed harmless, it's important to remember this part too, because it's a part of the story. So when I was in high school, I was best friends with a girl who was a little bit weird, and she was the definition of pretty much a PKM girl. Her name was Amanda, and I would stay at Amanda's house basically every weekend. And after we graduated, I was there pretty much 24/7. But never once did I feel weird in her house or anything. But one day Amanda calls me basically in tears, insisting that someone has broken into her house and that she hears footsteps and banging. And I told her that I would come over and check it out because I lived literally like 10 minutes down the road from her. I show up and the doors are all locked. I, being an idiot, jokingly start kicking on the doors, yelling out, calling for any serial killers to come out. It made her laugh and feel better, and, to be honest, it kind of made me feel better too. Weeks passed, though, and we forgot about the situation, and we just go on with our lives. When suddenly Amanda is telling me how her dad finally fixed the upstairs bathroom shower where her bedroom is, and that every time that she uses the shower, she feels like she's being watched and the lights flicker, and it really creeps her out. I play it off as her just being spooked or trying to creep me out or something. But then another time her mom is talking to me and tells me that she got spooked because the door to that bathroom got stuck in. She said that it felt like someone was holding it shut again. I play it off as just something that can be scientifically explained. Their house was split level and her parents basically had the entire downstairs and their kids had the upper level. But there were two rooms that suddenly started bothering me, and it was the upper living room and the laundry room downstairs. Every time that I'd go upstairs, I would swear that I saw a black figure in the corner of my eye. And every time that I would go into the laundry room, it was eerily dark, even with the lights on, and freezing cold, even in the middle of summer. It was weird, but in the end, I just sort of avoided those areas, and I had read something about how the sound vibrations can cause people to think that they see something that's not really there or something along those lines. Point is that it made me feel better in the laundry room. I figured, was just CUZ and had concrete flooring, so it was cooler. But one night I had come over late after work and went downstairs to take a shower. I had laid down on her bed with her door open and my back turned, and I just got this awful feeling of being watched all of a sudden. You know how sometimes you can almost hear when someone is sneaking up on you? Well, I had that feeling. Thank you so much for joining me in the world of Midnight Dark Stories. I hope these tales have sent shivers down your spine and sparked your imagination. Remember to subscribe, like, and share your scariest thoughts in the comments. Until the next time we meet in the darkness, keep the thrill alive.